Hi, everybody. My name is Mary Anderson. I'm the Public Information Officer for Montgomery County Health and Human Services. This is just a very quick opportunity to ask Dr. Gayles some questions leading up to the weekend. My apologies up front. You should each be getting our news release momentarily. I apologize that you don't have it in front of you at the moment. Dr. Gayles will answer some questions, and as soon as we get that press release going, we'll make sure that all of you have it. What I would like to do, if possible, is can you put your questions in the chat box, much like we do for the Wednesday briefing. And I'll call on you that way, and then give me a second to unmute you. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Gayles.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for being flexible and accommodating my schedule, and hopefully we'll get your questions answered. The first thing I want to say is I hope everyone has a safe holiday weekend, and hopefully you get some downtime with your families to take a break from the marathon that is COVID-19. Well, I'm sure a lot of the questions, and there's interest in terms of our decision not to move forward with phase 3. Let us be very clear. We continue to look at the data from a surveillance and an epidemiology perspective to guide our decisions. And when we looked at the measures in terms of where we stand across a host of different things, we see that our daily case count, in fact, in late June, when the county entered phase 2, we were averaging 67 cases per day. The current 7-day average of new cases, confirmed cases, is at 85. So when we look at numbers where we were, we have been making, we had seen significant improvements to where I think we even saw some days where we were having cases in the mid-30s to where we are now. The numbers remain too high and demonstrates that our community transmission has not dropped to a level where we feel comfortable and confident that we will be able to mitigate as much transmission as possible if we move forward, increasing capacity and increasing potential points of contact as designated by the governor's moving to phase 3, including those different things and different options. So we also want to make sure that folks understand is that we will continue to look through all of the different activities and provisions we have on a regular basis to determine and assess if any of these activities can be done safely. But it's important to emphasize and remind folks is that even in all of our best intentions of designing safety plans to be able to execute different opportunities, all of those are built upon a foundation of having lower community transmission. So consistent with our conversation around schools, the same principles apply when looking at different provisions and activities that are allowed and permissible. We have to have demonstrated lower community transmission to be able to increase those provisions, again, to be able to feel comfortable and confident that we can do so safely. I will stop there, but happy to answer. Actually, well, I will not stop there. I will put in a plug for our holiday messaging. We recognize, again, that this has been a long haul. We've been at this since, again, our first case. We got our first 3 cases on Thursday, March 5th. That's almost 6 months ago, 6 months to the date tomorrow. And we have asked folks to adhere to guidelines that go against our normal rules of engagement. We've asked you to stay at home and shelter at home. We've asked you to minimize your contacts with others, including your family members and other people within your networks. We've asked you to wear face coverings when going out in public, and we've asked you to physically distance yourself away from other folks to mitigate transmission. We've asked you to do this over a long period of time, and we continue to ask you to abide by these provisions because these are the provisions that have been demonstrated to keep people safe and to minimize the spread of COVID-19. This is always tricky when it comes to holiday season because it's a natural time where we would get together with our families. We would break bread and have barbecues and go to the beach and do vacation type activities. And we're asking you to minimize those. And if you do participate in those types of activities, we continue to encourage you to wear your face coverings, to minimize your exposure to individuals who live outside of your household, to minimize touching and points of contact, to continue to wash your hands, and continue to exercise physical distancing as much as possible. We ask you to do these things because they've been demonstrated to keep people safe and mitigate further spread of COVID-19. So with that, have a very safe holiday weekend, and I hope you enjoy your time with your family members and get a break from the daily routine. Happy to answer any questions you have.
Tom from Channel 7, you're going to go first, and then I'm going to go to Mike Murillo.
And forgive me, Dr. Gayles, I hope I'm not making you repeat yourself, but my Wi-Fi picked a wonderful time to kick me off as you started there. So my understanding is we've been kind of waiting for the specifics. So as far as, you know, restaurants with entertainment versus theaters, movie theaters, play theaters, live entertainment venues, are there any changes coming, and are there any specifics yet that you can give?
Are you there, Travis?
Well, there are no changes. The only changes that we have put forward are secondary to some questions within a phase 2 order within the governor's provisions. And within that,
Now we're having trouble with you, Dr. Gayles. Is he freezing up for others as well?
Yeah, I just lost him, actually.
Okay.
There he is.
Travis, you might need to start again.
so it looks like I got kicked off. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can now. I don't know what happened. Maybe everybody's on Zoom
Okay.
at 4:15. All right, give that a try now. Sorry about that.
Okay. I will start again. So to your question, we have not made any provisions or changes to any of the orders that we previously had in place. The areas that we did provide are clarification to live performances, which is a clarification of a phase 2 order that was put forward by the governor. Under the clarification and our allowances for live performances for food service establishments, breweries, and wineries. Under this order, food service establishments such as those included would be permitted to have live performances that are incidental to the establishment's primary purpose, which is to serve food and or drink. Dancing would be prohibited as it would constitute a material change to the establishment's primary purpose. Individuals present during a live performance must follow all applicable provisions of County Executive Order 098-20, including maintaining social distancing and best practices issued by the state for such performances. So outside of that, we are not recommending any current changes to any of the provisions related to the other entertainment provisions that the governor included in phase 3, as well as we are not making any adjustments to any of the capacity limits that were put forward by the phase 3 guidelines at this time. And we will, as always, we will continue to look at the different activities that are permitted and permissible. And I want to emphasize that the reason why we're doing this is the activities and the increases in capacity have been tied to activities that have demonstrated concern for higher points of contact that would make transmitting the virus easier. And so again, given where we stand in terms of our community transmission levels, we do not feel comfortable based upon the data, in fact, seeing a higher daily average case load than we saw in early to mid-July. When we move to phase 2, we don't feel comfortable opening up any more of those provisions at this time. We will continue to review and continue to meet with individuals from those respective industries to discuss how we can safely move forward when the corresponding community transmission levels are at a point where we feel comfortable doing so.
And the county executive had actually written that letter to the governor asking for live entertainment to be allowed, and he didn't mention just at restaurants. Why not allow, like, say, like we did interviews with the Only Theater? Why not allow them to at least do an outdoor show with restrictions?
Well, as I mentioned, we're continuing to review. At this time, we're not making any adjustments to it. We continue to review and continue to meet with representatives from those respective industries to discuss how we could potentially do so and do so in a safe manner in our current environment, or does that mean waiting until the numbers improve more significantly to be able to do so?
I'm going to read a question from Mike Murillo, and then Mike, let me unmute you as well. How does the county plan to enforce phase 2 rules, especially with businesses on a holiday weekend when other counties in the state are moving into the phase 3? Do we expect any confusion among businesses with other counties moving into phase 3?
Well, as always, we hope that we, continue to provide messaging and communication to our business community as quickly as we can. And certainly, if there are questions, we do have representatives from the county government who meet and communicate directly with the business community on a regular basis, and certainly hope to be able to answer those particular issues. Now, us being at a different pace or phase in the state is not something new. As you all may remember and recall, when the governor moved to phase 1, we were one of the few counties that at that time said our epidemiologic data did not support being able to do so because our transmission rates were so much higher. And we waited approximately 2 weeks before we made that move to move to a modified phase 1. And similarly, when the governor moved to phase 2, we also did not move at the same pace. And then when we did, we moved to a modified phase 2. And I want to emphasize is that in doing so, we have been able to bring our numbers down to a level that went from being one of the top 2 contributors of daily cases of COVID-19 and one of the highest test positivity rates in the state to now we actually have a test positivity that sits somewhere between, depending upon the day, somewhere between 12th and 15th in the state. Our cases per 100,000 are significantly lower than other jurisdictions of comparable size. And even though, yes, our daily case count does remain at a higher point than we feel comfortable being able to move to an additional phase, it has seen significant improvement from the days where we were experiencing, at least averaging even over 100. We were averaging close to 200 to 300 cases on a daily basis.
I'm going to go ahead, if I can, Mike, and jump to a Fox 5 question and try to get back to you guys. But again, as I said at the beginning, Dr. Gayles has a very limited amount of time. This isn't one of our regular briefings. This was a chance for him to try to get a number of interviews done in the same time frame. So here's a question from Fox 5. What's your reaction to the CDC warning Americans that if they do not continue to follow COVID-19 safety guidelines, the U.S. could see nearly 30,000 more deaths before the end of the month?
Well, the reaction is not a surprise because that's been consistent what we've been trying to warn folks all along. Now, part of the challenge and balance is if we're good at our job from a public health perspective, we drive cases down as we've seen. So we went from averaging 300 cases back in May and June to the point now where we do see double-digit cases. And so in many folks' heads, they say, oh well, it's natural. We had a good day. Let's rush. Let's run and let's open up quickly. We saw what happened when you do that in states like Texas and Florida and other areas across the country who had seen lower daily total cases. And they made provisions to move forward and increase those provisions, and those cases spiked up. And so what we want to caution folks is we want to continue to see the numbers get better. But we can't, when we've had 3 or 4 days of good numbers, we can't take that as a sign that we're fixed, the viral load has completely dropped, and it's safe to increase points of contact and relax those provisions and protocols that we have in place. And it is a call to arms. Again, this has been a long haul, and we recognize that. I mean, heck, I think we were talking about before the press conference, this is nearly 200 days in a row of working without a day off. So we recognize that folks are tired. We recognize that folks are fatigued. However, we also recognize that the viral load in the community still remains too high to open up fully. Because the concern is that if we do so too quickly and too expeditiously, without making sure that we continue to stick to the provisions that we put into place that have been shown to work, is that we could see cases spike up again. And not only in terms of 30,000 deaths, but we could see hundreds of thousands of more cases before we have a vaccine candidate, before we are able to be able to test more rapidly than we're doing already. So it's a call to arms, and it's a sense of, again, recognizing that we've been at this a long time, that we can't get complacent and we can't relax, and we've got to remain vigilant in terms of doing the things that we know are effective at keeping people safe.
So Caitlin Peets had a clarification question. I'm having some trouble getting people unmuted. So if you would do me a favor and put your questions in the chat box, that would help me a lot. So Caitlin, I think you're unmuted.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Dr. Gayles, I'm sorry, I know you've already run through it, but you said that there are no real changes to what's being allowed, but you are clarifying that some restaurant establishments can have live entertainment, but you said that was part of a previous order that you needed to provide clarification about. Where was the confusion on what was allowed in, as far as like live entertainment in these restaurant establishments?
So part of the confusion lied in the governor's phase 2 orders and language around the issue of live performances. So the county executive wrote a letter to the governor asking for clarification to define when and where it was acceptable to be able to make those allowances. And so the letter that he asked, he received some guidance, and that guidance has helped guide the clarification that has been provided in terms of the language that will be put forward today. And it will be further described in the press release that Mary mentioned, and the guidance that will be placed on the county website, the coronavirus website.
Got it. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat box. Anybody else going once, going twice? John, it looks like you have a question.
My apologies. 3 times
No
over
worries.
question. You've got it before, but I'm late. It's on the letter. So basically, there is a change with the live performances. There will be some live performances that are allowed now in Montgomery County.
Yeah, so under the order, food service establishments, such as breweries, restaurants, wineries, would be permitted to have live performances. Again, that is incidental to the establishment's primary purposes, which is to serve food and drink. And those provisions would be still subject to the other precautions that are put into place. For example, dancing would not be permitted, as it would constitute a material change to the establishment's primary purpose. And so, again, and the same rules would apply in terms of capacity limits to those establishments and to social gatherings overall, which would be, the indoor facilities have their capacity limits, and social gatherings have capacity limits at 50. We've not made any changes to any of the capacity rules that apply to any of our businesses, facilities, those kinds of things. And at this point, we're not recommending, at least in the short term, any changes or any increases to those levels.
All right, John, I muted you again, and we're going to take one last question from Mike Murillo. If possible, could we see a modified phase 3? And if so, what's the timeline, or any idea of a timeline?
Right now, our principal priority is making sure that we can get our numbers to a place where we can even begin to have that conversation. So I'm not going to commit to say we're going to have a modified phase 3 or give a date. Right now, what keeps me up is seeing the numbers where they are. And as I mentioned earlier today in a meeting, along with the staff of Public Health Services, refuse to believe that 70 to 80 cases is the best that we can do, and that becomes our baseline. We are committed to doing everything we can across, testing, contact tracing, enforcing the rules and guidelines where they stand, and being careful and judicious in terms of how we provide guidance to others in terms of the activities that are permitted and how they can be done and be done as safely as possible. Because again, our ultimate goal is to get to a point where we are seeing at minimum a moderate level of transmission, which by CDC definition would put us somewhere in the area of 30 to 35 cases a day. And ultimately, we want to drive it even lower than that to get to demonstrated low transmission, which by CDC definition would be cases in the single digits on a daily basis. So that's our priority right now. That's what we're committed to doing. And that's what we're focused on, because ultimately, if we do that and sustain that, then we can have deeper conversations about making allowances for more activities to be able to be opened up to society, where we feel comfortable that they can be done safely and we won't see significant transmission as a result.
Okay, that's it, folks. I promised Dr. Gayles that I would try to give him some semblance of a normal Friday afternoon workday on this Friday before Labor Day. I think all of you get the invitations to our Wednesday media briefings. If for some reason there's somebody on here who doesn't get that, send me an email at mary.anderson@montgomerycountymd.gov. I promise that press release is coming in, hopefully in the next 15 minutes. You'll all get that, and I appreciate it, and have a nice weekend. We'll see some or all of you on next weekend's or next Wednesday's weekly media briefing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Be safe, everybody.